Memphis, July of 1976. The air was heavy and humid, thick with the sound of cicadas and the restless hum of summer. Inside Graceland, Elvis Presley paced the floor, restless and hollow despite the golden world surrounding him. The parties bored him. The fame felt heavy. And for the first time in months, he wanted something simple to be just a man again. He put on a plain black shirt, slipped on dark sunglasses, and quietly stepped into the Memphis heat. No entourage. No announcement, just Elvis, the man behind the legend, as he turned onto Beale Street, the beating heart of Memphis music. He heard something that stopped him cold. Not a record, not a radio, a voice alive, trembling, real. From a street corner came a thin teenager, cross-legged beside an open guitar case. His instrument was old, scarred, but the sound raw and beautiful filled the air. He was singing "Love Me Tender," and for a moment, Elvis felt his own song return to him as something new, something more human. The boy's name was Michael Chen, 16, homeless for 8 months since aging out of the foster system. People called him Guitar Mike. Every day he played for change, surviving on luck, music, and stubborn hope. Elvis watched from a small crowd as the boy shifted into "Can't Help Falling in Love." Wise men say only fools rush in. The words hit Elvis in the chest. He stepped forward, pulling a $100 bill from his wallet. The crowd parted instinctively, sensing a familiar gravity. When Michael reached the chorus, Elvis dropped the bill into the case. Michael's eyes widened. $100 was 2 weeks of food. He looked up and froze, even behind the sunglasses. The face was unmistakable. "Keep playing, son," Elvis said softly. "You've got something special there. You're Elvis Presley, just a guy who loves good music." Elvis smiled. "What's your name, Michael?" "Michael Chen." "You hungry?" "Michael," the boy nodded. Elvis helped him pack his guitar, and together they walked to a small diner nearby. The owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, knew Elvis and didn't even blink over burgers and milkshakes. Michael told his story: the foster homes, the loneliness, the nights he played to keep from falling apart. "Your songs saved me," he whispered. "When everything fell apart, I played Love Me Tender to remember that someone out there understood." Elvis listened quietly. He saw himself in the boy, the same hunger, the same ache for belonging. "You know what I hear when you sing," he said finally. "The blues, the kind you can't fake or learn. You've lived it." Then, after a pause, "I'm heading into the studio next week. Want to come? Not as backup, I want to hear you for real." Michael stared in disbelief. "You're serious, dead serious?" Elvis said, "But on one condition: you've got to get off the streets. I know people who'll help." Michael nodded, tears breaking loose. And that was how a lost boy on Beale Street found a doorway to destiny when the king stopped long enough to listen. 3 days after that fateful afternoon on Beale Street, the doors of Sun Studio swung open, and Michael Chen, the boy who once slept on sidewalks, stepped inside wearing clean clothes and holding a brand new Gibson guitar Elvis had personally chosen for him. The room shimmered in amber light, bouncing off the polished wood floors and old microphones. Elvis stood in the control booth, coffee in hand, eyes filled with something between calm and nostalgia. It was here, over 20 years earlier, that he'd recorded "That's All Right." Now, another boy stood where he once had, The session musicians eyed Michael skeptically. They were used to legends, not street kids. Elvis said only one thing: let him sing. You'll understand. Michael took a deep breath and began Heartbreak Hotel. Within seconds, the chatter vanished. His voice was raw, aching, untrained but real. It carried every lonely night he'd spent on Memphis pavement, every dream that refused to die. When he finished, the room was silent. Elvis, behind the glass, folded his arms and nodded slowly. That boy's got it. The producer whispered, whatever it is, he's got it in spades. During a break, Michael said shyly, Mr. Presley, I've written some songs too. Nothing big. Just stuff I play on the street. Play me one. Elvis said. Michael strummed softly, his voice barely above a whisper. The song was called Memphis Rain. It spoke of watching life pass by from a doorway, of loneliness softened only by kindness. But the rain don't judge the lonely. It just falls the same on everyone. When the final note faded, the studio froze. Elvis nodded slowly. That's not a song, Michael. That's a confession. Then he turned to the producer. We're recording it. Not as my song, as his. The room gasped. Elvis Presley, the king himself, was giving his studio time to a homeless teen. And we're doing it as a duet. Elvis added, no one understands Memphis better than we do, one who's been hungry, and one who's been full for too long. When Memphis Rain played, magic happened. Elvis's weathered baritone and Michael's fragile tenor braided together two worlds. One heartbeat. The song wasn't polished. It was honest, and that honesty became its power. When it ended, Elvis removed his headphones. Michael, he said softly, how would you feel if I helped you get a record deal, not as my protégé, as Michael Chen? The artist, tears welled up in the boy's eyes. Why are you doing this for me? Elvis's gaze dropped. Because someone once did it for me. A man named Sam Phillips took a chance on a poor kid from Tupelo. Now it's my turn. 3 weeks later, Memphis Rain climbed the charts not because of fame, but because it was true. For Michael, the real miracle had already happened the moment Elvis stopped to listen. Because sometimes, music doesn't just save the listener, it saves the singer too. News of Memphis Rain spread across America like wildfire. From tiny Tennessee radio stations to the front pages of New York papers, the story felt almost mythical. The king of rock meeting a homeless boy on a street corner, and together creating a song that would change them both. Memphis Rain wasn't just a duet. It was a confession between two generations. Elvis's seasoned, weary voice blending with Michael's fragile, youthful one. Together, they reminded the world what real music was: not perfection, but truth. Reporters called it Elvis Presley's final miracle. When people heard it, they said it felt like coming home. In interviews, Elvis said quietly, sometimes you have to stop and listen to someone else to find yourself again. Michael Chen, once a nameless street kid, now had a home. Elvis had arranged for him to live with a kind family and return to school. Yet what moved Michael most was how Elvis treated him not as a project, but as a friend. One morning at Graceland, Michael found Elvis at his white piano. Got a new song? Elvis asked. Smiling, Michael nodded and sang a soft melody about gratitude and time. When he finished, Elvis said gently, "You've got the soul of an old man. Kid, That's both a gift and a burden. From that day on, they wrote together, Elvis teaching him craft, Michael teaching him wonder. Within 2 months, Memphis Rain hit number 3 on the Billboard charts. But Elvis didn't care about numbers. It's not about where the song lands, he said. It's about how many hearts it reaches. Fans began seeing Elvis differently, not just as a superstar, but as a man with compassion and courage. And for Michael, success was no longer the miracle. The miracle had already happened the day someone decided to listen. When asked on TV, "What was it like to sing with Elvis Presley?" Michael answered softly, "The miracle wasn't singing with him. The miracle was that he stopped to hear me." That one sentence echoed across America. Talent scouts started looking beyond stages to subway stations, street corners, and small-town fairs. Elvis smiled when he heard about it. "See, Michael," he said, "when you do the right thing, the song keeps singing even after you stop." One night, after a long studio session, a sudden summer rain began to fall. Michael tilted his head up and laughed. "Elvis," he said, "maybe this rain is still singing our song." Elvis nodded, raindrops glittering on his hair like silver threads. "And you," he said softly, "you reminded me why I ever loved music." Months later, Elvis's health began to fail. But in his home at Graceland, among all his trophies, he kept one small tape, a secret recording of Michael singing "Love Me Tender" on that Beale Street corner. After Elvis passed in 1977, they found it in a wooden drawer, labeled in his own handwriting. This is what real music sounds like: raw, honest, and from the heart. Decades have passed since Elvis Presley's final walk down Beale Street, yet the story still breathes in Memphis. At that same corner stands a small bronze plaque where Elvis Presley discovered Michael Chen's Summer, 1976. Beneath it reads, "Because sometimes the greatest thing you can do is stop and listen." Tourists take photos, but the locals just smile. They know it wasn't just about a star helping a boy. It was proof of what music truly is: connection. After Elvis's passing in 1977, Michael released his debut album, Songs for the King, a tribute to the man who changed his life. It debuted at number 3 on the charts. But for Michael, numbers meant nothing. "Elvis didn't save me because I was talented," he said. "He saved me because he saw me as human." And that changed everything. With his first earnings, Michael founded the Memphis Rain Foundation, giving instruments and free lessons to homeless youth. Each guitar bears a small engraving, "Just sing, someone will hear." When asked what Elvis meant to him, Michael always said, "He didn't just bring me to music. He showed me what kindness looks like when it becomes action." Among Elvis's most cherished belongings found at Graceland was a small tape of Michael singing "Love Me Tender," labeled in Elvis's own handwriting. This is what real music sounds like: raw, honest, and from the heart. On Beale Street today, as the sun sets and guitars hum from open doors, someone always ends up playing Memphis Rain. It no longer belongs to Elvis or Michael. It belongs to the city, to anyone who has ever walked through darkness and still believed in light. Now a grown man, Michael often says on stage, people ask what the real miracle was. It wasn't meeting Elvis Presley. The miracle was witnessing how one person's kindness can rewrite another person's story. He pauses, smiling softly. You don't have to be famous to make magic. You just have to stop, listen, and believe that goodness still has a place in this world. When you hear Memphis Rain, remember, each of us can be someone's Elvis. Somewhere out there, a dream, a voice, or a life is waiting to be noticed. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person stopping long enough to listen. Tell us in the comments. Do you believe one act of kindness can change a life? What do you think might have happened if Elvis hadn't stopped that day? If this story touched your heart, please hit super thanks to support our channel and help us keep sharing stories of music, compassion, and the power of listening. Because maybe, just maybe, the moment you stop to listen is when the world starts to sing.